Catherine Full Body is an okay remaster of a fantastic game. Hi, my name is Jazz and welcome to my channel. Today I want to talk about a game I enjoy a lot, Catherine Full Body. I plan to go in depth in my discussion and I hope that I can bring attention to a fantastic game even though a few seconds ago I referred to it as just okay. Catherine, a puzzle game developed by Atlus, the developers of the Shin Megami Tensei series, originally released in 2011 for the PS3 and Xbox 360. I played Catherine upon release when I was in 8th grade. It was around this time I was first familiarizing myself with Atlus and its catalog, since I had a friend who was a grade above me who introduced me to the company through the Persona series, specifically Persona 3. At the time, the only games I played were the mainstream games you'd expect a kid to play during that time frame. Assassin's Creed, Call of Duty, maybe a little Minecraft. Catherine was something fresh and definitely the first time I ever dabbled in a puzzle game. Well, other than Tetris. Catherine's gameplay is pretty simple. You start at the bottom of a massive wall and you have to move blocks around in order to build a stairway for you to make it to the top. A very simple premise with a satisfying feedback loop. And I know I'm not alone in that sentiment. Catherine received mostly positive reviews upon its initial release, so I think we can agree on the fact that Catherine is a great game. Fast forward to today, Catherine has received a fresh coat of paint with the release of Catherine Full Body, and I plan to pick it apart to the best of my ability. Allow this to be my disclaimer. I do think Catherine Full Body is something that you should play if you are a fan of puzzlers. This video will contain spoilers for the game in its entirety, so I ask that you all stop this video if you haven't played and go play the game yourself first. Even though this game has 13 endings, I will be mostly speaking in regards to the 2 endings I got. If anything has been left out, before you rush to the comments and say, but Jazz, in this ending, this happened, keep in mind that this video was based off of the endings that I got in my 10 hours with this game. I think it'll be easier to talk about the game's story this way because in all honesty, I'm willing to bet that those who play Catherine Full Body will only play through its story once, maybe twice. Like I said, Catherine Full Body is an okay remaster of a fantastic game. The game starts out like the original, where you meet the narrator character Trish in a bar. With her stylish double puffball afro hair, she spins to action, giving a brief synopsis of the story for vets and newcomers alike. This is where I ran into my first issue. Immediately I noticed she seemed whiter than I remember her. Now before you watch this and go to Twitter to accuse Atlus of whitewashing, I have to let you know that while she does look a little less ethnic in this game, it isn't because of some white is more attractive agenda that Atlus is pushing. It's because this game's lighting is very different from the originals. This isn't a complaint, but this game looks a little shiny to me, which kind of upsets me because this is an issue with most remasters. Personally, I like the more dark, smoky tone that the original game had, and I feel like it was lost with this game's new shaders. Other than that, I didn't really find much issue with the game's art direction. Another small thing I noticed was how awful the lip syncing was. I don't remember it being this bad in the original game, but then again, maybe it was. I would have to play it again to see. For now, this isn't a massive complaint either. The story starts out a little different with the introduction of the character Rin, a cute kind of airheaded girl that's a huge breath of fresh air in a story like this. When it comes to stories that are meant to be taken seriously, I think it's nice to have a light-hearted character, especially when the game has a somewhat melancholy tone and tackles depressing themes such as breakups and growing up. Rin is running away from a giant shadow-like figure, and she just happens to bump into our protagonist and end up in a very compromising position. Now, remember this shot because I'll be bringing it up much later. It is very important. The game flies into a rap opening that's exactly what you'd expect from Atlus, especially if you're a fan of the Persona series. Shoji Meguro definitely continues to deliver fantastic music, and I expect nothing less from Atlus. After the opening, you're thrown into the game's tutorial, which is where I ran into my very first real issue. In this remaster, a remix mode was introduced that, well, introduces some new block types, specifically the combination blocks, and while I do think these blocks are fresh and a good addition by themselves, they absolutely do not work in conjunction with the other quality of life changes added to the game. When you hang off the ledge of a block, it now shows you the boundaries of every block on that row and lets you know exactly what blocks you can reach from your current position. Instead of game overs when you die, it instead undoes your fatal mistake, saving you time and a button press. It was obvious that they added these in order to make the game easier and more accessible to those who struggle with puzzle games and struggle with the original release. I do think that these were fantastic changes because, fortunately, I got stuck in the tutorial level. Now look, I don't think I'm the best at video games. However, I have completed games that most would assume to be much harder than this one. So understand my frustration and confusion when I got stuck on the tutorial level, a level you can easily clear in the original game without much resistance. I quickly realized that the small changes they made to the game and the introduction of the combination block are exactly the cause of such an oddly placed difficulty spike. You can probably argue that they made the tutorial so hard so that no other difficulty spike would come off as surprising or jarring to the player and make them more likely to stick with the game till its conclusion. Game difficulty is something that is very subjective and it's very hard to get right, but I don't know if I can get behind this type of game balance. This remaster seems to be a bit harder, the blocks fall a bit faster, and each level's path of progression seems to have undergone an overhaul. I'm not sure if these changes are for the better, but that's just my opinion. There really isn't much to say about the gameplay of this game as a whole. It's a puzzler, you either like it or you don't. What I can say is that the climbing aspect of the game is satisfying, especially when you get into a sort of autopilot zone and start rapidly solving the puzzles. This sort of gameplay is something unique to Catherine, and I feel like it absolutely succeeds in its moment-to-moment gameplay. They implemented a cool online interaction with the sheep having name tags before you start every night, and they also implemented this fantastic retry assist mode. I personally believe accessibility is something that is very important in gaming, and this retry assist mode is definitely one of the best ways I've ever seen it implemented. The retry assist mode relieves the player of control and takes them back to their highest point after resetting. Instead of instantaneously placing you back at the top of the staircase, it shows you a path that provides the player with strategies to use in future levels. And while I think that this is a system that developers should definitely look into in terms of how to make their games more accessible to players, I do think we should also talk about the con of a system like this. Retry assist is almost mandatory in some of the game's later stages. I want to remind you guys, I am not the best at video games, but some of this game's later stages are downright insane when it comes to puzzle design. When you have a game like Catherine where you have to think quick on your feet, you absolutely cannot have levels like this one. Now, quick, look at the screen and tell me how to scale this tower while remembering you can only climb one block at a time. If you have been paying attention to the video thus far, then you should have a good idea of how the game's mechanics work. So put your answers in the comments, and I plan to move on from this topic, but I look forward to reading what you had to say on this subject. After finishing the tutorial, the story progresses with a well-written dialogue between Vincent and his girlfriend Catherine. There's a little bit of foreshadowing here that is definitely appreciated, and we get a glimpse of the curse that kickstarts the rumor that drives this game's narrative. After that, we are segued into a conversation with Vincent and his friends Toby and Johnny. Johnny looks a little bit off in the anime cutscene and doesn't really match his in-game sprite at all. I wonder what happened here because this is an issue I only saw with Johnny. The more I see Rin, the more I start to love her charm and exactly what she brings to the table. She is literally a ray of sunshine, and I will probably say it more and more throughout this video, but she definitely steals the show from the rest of the cast every time she is on screen. After getting chewed out by his friends for wanting to wait before tying the knot, Vincent sits alone and the player is introduced to the second part of the game. In between each night, you're able to come here and interact with other bar attendees, play a minigame, and even answer some text to further sway your good or evil meter. There isn't much to do here. I pretty much ignored the extra things shown to me because they were just smaller portions of things that are done on a much grander scale in the main story. Interacting with people in the bar provides you with small tidbits of the curse and those who fall victim to it, but everything you find out doesn't really matter because if you think about it, you can put two and two together yourself and come to the same conclusions. The arcade cabinet minigame is just the main game's puzzle mechanics on a much smaller scale. Why would I waste my time here when I could just progress the story? I understand why they put this here, but maybe in the remake they should have added multiple minigames, maybe with different playstyles to really give the player a break from the puzzles. After answering some text, the player is introduced to Catherine, who I will now, for the rest of this video, refer to as C. Catherine. She is beautiful and sexy and completely stands out alongside K. Catherine and Rin. Her character design stands out the most amongst the cast of Catherine, and I think that's intentional. I read somewhere that Shigenori Tsujima, the art director of Catherine, wanted to make a hot character which he said wasn't much of a staple in Japanese media like it is in westerns. I think he succeeded in this attempt at making a woman that stands out amongst her peers. After completing the second night, we are given a glimpse into the romance of Vincent and Catherine that was oddly missing in the original. When I first played Catherine in 2011, I ended up getting the Freedom ending, and even though I probably would have gotten that ending regardless, just based on my answers to the questions, I didn't really care. I had no reason to like K. Catherine or even want to pursue her other than, well, it's the right thing to do. In the remake, the game gives multiple glimpses into who Catherine is outside of the few times we see her in the cutscenes that came over from the original, giving more of an incentive to actually care about Catherine. The story progresses with Vincent waking up alongside C. Catherine, and this is the beginning of the downward spiral that Vincent goes into after realizing he cheated on his girlfriend of 5 years. Rin begins her position as pianist at the Stray Sheep Bar, and we jump back to when Rin and Vincent first met. It seemed like Rin was being chased by something monstrous. We only saw a shadow, but whatever she was fleeing from was something otherworldly. We snap back to the present as Rin officially begins her first day. This cutscene is a little bit of an exposition dump, but I understand why it was done this way. Instead of rewriting the story from the ground up with Rin included in the mix, they just squeezed her into the gaps that the original story had, which made cutscenes like this one seem kinda off. During the third night, Rin shows up in Vincent's nightmares, playing the piano and stopping the blocks from falling so Vincent can finish the stage. You find Rin atop the home platforms, tapping away at her piano, playing much better than she did at the Stray Sheep. She seems to not know what she is doing or why she is there, but she feels as if her music is something that can help the other sheep in their plight. After getting this information, she vanishes, and it's back to business as usual. You find her again at the next platform, and her music is definitely having an effect on the other sheep. From this point onward, she randomly starts playing music, and it stops the blocks from falling, giving you some extra time to make your ascent. This mechanic is good in theory, but it's awful in practice. Since it happens at what seem to be random intervals, this mechanic never procced when I needed it to, and across my 10-hour playthrough, it only triggered maybe 4 or 5 times. It just doesn't make sense to me why this wasn't allocated to a button so that the player could trigger it when they thought it was necessary. It just seems to me like that would be the way to go for something like this. The next day, Vincent and Kay Catherine meet up at their normal spot, and she drops the bombshell that she might be pregnant. Vincent's response here is perfect because I think every guy in the situation would react the way he did, especially if they know that they've been cheating. And just to pump up the anxiety to the max, C. Catherine calls and Vincent has to quickly defuse the situation before K. Catherine catches on. Also in this cutscene, there's another great piece of foreshadowing. On his way home, Vincent finds Rin's doors open, so he goes inside to make sure everything's okay. He finds Rin asleep underneath her piano and wakes her up for a really cute interaction. Now, I'm jaded, so when I see characters or people who seem to be so full of wonder and excitement, it really is a breath of fresh air. Also, why the fuck is Rin's full name Catherine with a Q? Like, are you kidding me, Atlas? Around this point, I'm starting to fall in love with this game's aesthetic and its dialogue. Vincent and his friends at the bar feel authentic, especially when he shares with them that Catherine might be pregnant. K. Catherine. And I hate the fact that I have to go back on that statement almost immediately because this was the point that Atlas decided they were going to force in the same-sex discussion. Smack dab in the middle of the scene. Now, please bear with me before fleeing to your social media of choice and posting about how my video is homophobic. I think that representation is important and all, but I feel like here it was just shoved in. They awkwardly changed subjects and Erica calls Rin over just to get her opinion on the subject. It's obvious why this was done, and I can't knock him for trying to include this discussion, but I feel like this is something that Vincent and Rin could have talked about alone, or could have been segued a little better. There's already a lot of people who already think Atlas is homophobic and transphobic, even though they have some of the best gay and transsexual characters in their resume. So allow me to say yet again, I understand why they did this, but I just feel like it was executed very poorly. Just the whole liking girls combo and the jabs at Toby are just in poor taste. C. Catherine strengthens her stranglehold on Vincent and shit hits the fan when K. Catherine appears and Vincent somehow finds his way out of being caught. Not much really here to talk about. K. Catherine confirms she is pregnant, there's an awkward introduction between K. Catherine and Rin, and the game heavily implies that C. Catherine saw the conversation between Vincent and K. Catherine even though it's never brought up again. On the 5th day, Vincent wakes up to a call from a man named Steve who's claiming to be C. Catherine's boyfriend. This conversation is awful and really shows Vincent's beta male status. This is unrealistic. I think it's safe to say that most men would not react this way when confronted with someone threatening to kill you over a girl you seem to be sharing. Vincent takes this as an opportunity to break it off with C. Catherine, and after an odd stalker scare and some more delayed animations, the story proceeds with Rin coming over to check on Vincent after he falls and hits his head. Rin confesses to Vincent during this scene, and yeah, that does come out of nowhere. Vincent confronts C. Catherine, who claims that she doesn't know a Steve, and it opens up the possibility that K. Catherine might be the one that's been two-timing Vincent with Steve. The gang meets up at their normal spot to talk over the new information, and they debate whether or not K. Catherine could be capable of cheating. This is yet another instance of the sound being delayed and overlapping with another line, and the nightmares are starting to really blow up into a massive rumor once other men are showing up at the bar with the same complaint. Rin suddenly fires up on the piano, and she is 10 million times better, and for some reason Toby sent a video to everyone standing right next to him while he recorded it. Just why the fuck did he do this? He's right next to them. Everyone saw it. If they wanted a video, they could have easily recorded it themselves. The next morning, Vincent wakes up to an apartment infested with ants. C. Catherine just happens to be there in order to get rid of the source. Vincent also confronts K. Catherine about Steve, and she plays dumb as well. Vincent contacts Steve in order to get to the bottom since no one seems to know who he is. Vincent gets him to describe what his Catherine looks like, and to nobody's surprise, he describes a woman that doesn't fit the description of either Catherine. Steve becomes frantic, and Vincent tells him off and hangs up before Steve could finish his rant. Vincent seems relieved, but this interaction makes the player wonder, wait, if his Catherine is different from Vincent's Catherine's, how did he get Vincent's phone number? Is there a fourth Catherine? On his way home and after hearing a mild explosion from Ren's room, Vincent rushes in to find her unconscious in a bathing towel. He tries to shake her awake, causing her to turn over, and then her towel unravels and reveals that Ren is actually a boy. Now, anybody with a brain could have seen this coming, but I would give points to Atlas for trying to throw curveballs and make us think that she might be something alien. Vincent reacts to this like most people would, shock and maybe even a little bit of disgust. I debate that Vincent's anger and confusion here is normal because no one wants to be deceived. I think in 2019, transsexuals are slowly becoming normalized outside of some extreme cases, but when I speak to cisgendered heterosexual males about what they would do in a situation like this, most people agree that they would be upset because of the deception. Now look, I am not mentally equipped to have the discussion on whether or not transsexuals should have to relay this information to potential partners, but I am saying that his reaction here is completely normal, in line with his character even, and doesn't mean we need to cancel Atlas. With all of that in mind, this reveal is still dog shit for one reason and one reason only. Now, remember this shot because I'll be bringing it up much later. It is very important. Remember this line? There is no way you wouldn't know that Ren was a guy. Ren is literally riding Vincent's face. There is nothing you can say to make me believe Vincent would not notice or just forget this little detail. Vincent snaps at Ren, causing her to run away. Vin falls to the ground feeling like shit, and before waiting too long, he runs off to go apologize and run into Kay Catherine outside of Ren's apartment. He lies for some fucking reason about why he was there, and as soon as Kay Catherine starts talking, C Catherine calls. And Vincent basically says, look, I gotta go apologize to Ren, and runs off. Kay Catherine then reveals that she might not have been fully honest with him. Vincent makes it to the bar where he talks to Erica, who chastises him for freaking out. Am I using that word right? I'm pretty sure I'm using that word right. I am literally looking up chastise. Vincent gets a hold of Ren and apologizes, and there's a short back and forth between the two, and then for some reason, Ren decides that she can't go back to the apartment because she thinks Vincent thinks she's disgusting or some shit. Now, normally I would think that the writing here would be realistic, especially when Ren starts really diving into her feelings for Vincent. There's a really weird Ren line from Vincent here that was off-putting, but after this we literally never hear from Ren again. No text, she isn't brought up anymore by the characters, her stupid ability is absent from the puzzle sections, nothing. Vincent drops a line about how Ren saved everyone's lives, referring to her presence in the nightmares, and everyone was just as shocked as I was when he brought this up, and then guess what? It is never brought up again. Johnny pressures Vincent into figuring out whether or not Ren has stolen his heart, and then everyone talks about how they also been struggling with bad dreams. But who cares? Vincent finds some resolve and realizes he loves his girlfriend and wants to make things right with her. At the end of the nightmare sequences, you find out that the main sheep you've been interacting with throughout most of the game is Steve Delholm, the one that's accused you of stealing Catherine from him. Once they come to that conclusion, however, the shadow of Vincent Boss rises up and cuts the conversation short. Vincent tries to urge Steven to continue his climb, but Steve just freezes up for some reason. Even though he's one of the best climbers in the group, even though he was frantic about not wanting to die, his death did not make any sense right here. By this point, it's pretty obvious that everyone in the group is dealing with these nightmares. Vincent finds out that Steve died in real life and tried to crack the code in regards to the nightmares, and Vincent plans to break it off with C. Catherine and officially propose to Kay Catherine. Toby loses his virginity to Erica, who is also transgendered, and I guess it's a running gag to keep Toby in the dark. I just don't know. Come on, Atlas, you can do better than this. Come on. Vincent breaking it off with C. Catherine goes about as well as you would expect it to. His friends come and support him through the pain. Relieved that his infidelity has finally come to an end, he expresses excitement that he might actually be able to sleep. And he was right about being able to sleep. No nightmares, no C. Catherine. It seems everything is back to normal. Kay Catherine comes to visit, and just when you think it's all over, C. Catherine appears for the best scene in the entire game by a long shot. Vincent is finally confronted by the two women, and he is forced to come clean about his sexcapades over the past week. Both Catherine's vocal performances here are superb, and the writing, pacing, and cinematography are just perfect, and I wish that there were more instances of this greatness in the rest of the game, especially from this point on. I can literally feel the anger and frustration radiating off of Kay Catherine when she couldn't find the knife. In one instant, I wasn't the player. I felt like I was Kay Catherine just for those brief few seconds, due to Michelle Ruff's flawless performance of a woman who lost it for a split second after committing murder, even though it was in self-defense. When Vincent opens the door, the real world melts into the nightmare, and you have to escort Kay Catherine to the top of the staircase along with you. Now, when I first played this section in Catherine 2011, I audibly groaned because I knew that I was going to hate this section. But it isn't that bad. Yeah, I failed a few times, but only because I scaled the level too fast, not because of the game balance or poor AI. Once you make it to the top, Kay Catherine stops as the realization the love of her life cheated on her and she can't find it in herself to forgive him finally sets in. In this moment of weakness, Kay Catherine loses her footing, causing for Vincent to dive after her, proving that he's willing to give up his life to make sure his future is safe. Once the two denounce C. Catherine for good and walk through the door, it is revealed that it was all a dream and Vincent wakes up alongside Kay Catherine for real this time. She drops the bombshell that she actually wasn't pregnant and then has the audacity to break up with Vincent. Women these days, am I right, fellas? Anyway, it seems like Kay Catherine put 2 and 2 together herself and called Vincent out on his bullshit. She tells him like it is before straight up dumping him and walking away like nothing happened. Breakups are never this clean. When Catherine smiles and tells him there's nothing left between them after 5 years of dating just doesn't make any sense to me, even if you were cheated on. Vincent goes to relay this information to the squad when suddenly he realizes that C. Catherine is completely missing from his phone as if she didn't exist at all, causing him to question his sanity. And everyone lets him know that no one ever saw C. Catherine even though she interacted with him multiple times in the bar. After some detective work and some impressive memorization, Vincent realizes that the bartender had to see her, so he does what any sane man would do and roughs up the old man until he admits he saw something. The old man reveals that he was the source of the nightmare and kind of answers the question on why the cases seem so rampant amongst the bargoers. Vincent also rips off his shade so he can push the plot along and reveal that the bartender is actually the man's Thomas Mutton, the last man before Vincent to make it to the top of the tower in the nightmares. This whole interaction is awful. Thomas spills everything and then Vincent is like, wait, what? And makes him spill everything again. Vincent asks Erica if she heard him the first time and she didn't even seem interested. And then she acts surprised when he says he was the one causing all the nightmares like it was the first time he said it. His fucking reasoning for the nightmares is stupid too. Torturing and killing men because they don't want to get married. It slows down population growth, so his plan is to reduce the population so he can restore it. What the fuck? And then they talk about whether or not cheating on an imaginary girl is cheating still, and then Vincent's mom gets brought up and... oh, this game is bad! Vincent challenges the man to one more nightmare, and if Vincent survives, he gets a wish. Of course, they set it up like a WWE pay-per-view match, and the game's finale finally kicks off. Now, I haven't been speaking much about the levels because I talked about the gameplay at the beginning of the video, and these levels are some of the longest in the game. During my time with the game, I've never felt as if the puzzles were too long except for this part. To nobody's surprise, Vincent succeeds and he wakes up to go and tell Thomas that he doesn't have to set up the meeting, for he had an epiphany and realized he just wanted to be free the whole time, and this whole spiel is fucking bullshit. 5 years just evaporated. Everything he did for his relationship just doesn't mean anything. Normally this wouldn't bother me, but the last 2 hours of the game was built upon the premise of Vincent getting his girlfriend back. For him to just flip on us like this just left me unsatisfied, but not in the way that made me want to play the game again. But I did, because out of all the issues with the ending I received, the biggest issue I had was with how Ren was handled. So I played it again, this time playing for one of the Ren endings. During my second playthrough, nothing much changed until I got to this part.
Yeah, it all makes sense now. I love Ren. I know...
Fuck, Johnny.
If you answer all the questions correctly and do what is necessary to trigger the Ren route, Johnny punches Vincent in the face for betraying Kay Catherine. This is a powerful moment because if you pay attention to Johnny's dialogue and his body language whenever Catherine is brought up, it's obvious that he has loved Kay Catherine for a long time. Vincent understands he deserved this punch, but still realizes that he has to follow his heart. Johnny, being the fantastic friend he is, stands by Vincent through this realization, showing that nothing can come between genuine friendship, not even pussy. The next day, Vincent wakes up to some god-awful piano playing, which gets his hopes up that Ren might have returned to her apartment. However, yeah, I want to first say that I did in fact love this scene. I've always been a fan of shock value in visual novels, but man, did this scene seem a little bit out of place. I felt as if this scene would have fit better in the Freedom route instead of being hidden along the Ren route. It makes sense why it was placed here though, just so we can do the Vincent / Kay Catherine level this time with Ren in her stead. This reuse of content shouldn't be an issue because, like I said before, I believe most players will only play Catherine once, but once I played it twice, this bothered me. Instead of reusing a level, why couldn't there be a unique level here? That way it could have provided more of a reason to replay the game if you missed this content. Imagine if Vincent got hurt instead of Ren, and you have to drag him up the blocks leading to a slower, maybe even stealth-like based gameplay. Look, I'm just spitballing here, but reusing content is almost never a good thing, especially with something as tedious as puzzle game. At the top, Vincent confesses to Ren, and just when everything seems to be going well, Ren is snatched away by a demonic hand and Vincent wakes up in his apartment. Catherine shows up and a slightly altered breakup scene that's a little bit closer to reality plays out, and Vincent continues his search for Ren. The Thomas rough-up scene still happens, it's still trash, and the final stage doesn't really change much either. After the nightmare, everything seems to work out, and Thomas drops the bombshell that Ren is actually an angel, and Ren seconds it by bringing up her brother, allowing her to become human. What can I say here, honestly? It seems at this point Atlas is just trying to shock us more and more as the rest of this route plays out. The angel reveal did nothing for me, but made me roll my eyes and made me think to myself, of course she's an angel. Next thing you're going to tell me that the angels are actually just aliens from another planet. After some extra levels that don't really push the formula very much, we get the real ending, and turns out Ren was running from her brothers at the very beginning of the game. She was sent here to fulfill a mission for her kind, and in order to do that, she would have to have her memories erased. These aliens have been developing humankind behind the scenes for a while now, and yes, this is complete bullshit. A huge part of enjoying entertainment is a suspension of disbelief, and most of this video I continually criticize this game for not being realistic. If I knew that this was the climax this game was leading to, I wouldn't have pushed so hard for the game to be more realistic. A few months later, Ren is a famous pianist alongside Vincent. The two travel the galaxy in order to do shows, and I'm not making this up. I checked out of the story specifically at this scene. Catherine Full Body is an okay remaster of a fantastic game. If only it could have reached further into greatness instead of just giving the original concept a spit shine. Even though the latter half of this video was on the negative side, I still enjoyed my time with the game, even though it's dripping with issues. Catherine might not have aged as well as I thought it would, however, most of its minor issues can probably be fixed with a patch. If you're a fan of anime, visual novels, puzzlers, or Atlas, then you probably shouldn't sleep on Catherine Full Body. Thank you for watching this video. It was a lot longer than I expected, but I feel like I got my point across. If you enjoyed the video, why not give it a like and subscribe to see more videos like this one in the near future. If I said something you disagree with, why not leave a comment? I would love to better clarify on anything and further the conversation with those who are open to discussion. The next video will be much shorter and will be on Control. Thank you. Bye-bye.